April 1945. The once mighty heart of the Third Reich, Berlin, was no longer a city of dreams, but a landscape of nightmares. The air raid sirens, once a chilling call to shelter, now fell silent. There was nothing left to warn. The bombs had already sung their symphony of destruction, leaving behind a ghost city of skeletal buildings and rubble-choked streets. For the people of Berlin, the end was not a distant threat. It was the acrid smoke they breathed, the tremor of artillery in the ground beneath their feet. From the east, a storm of unprecedented scale was gathering. 2.5 million Soviet soldiers, a colossal force forged in the crucible of 4 years of brutal warfare, formed an iron ring around the city. They had fought their way from the snows of Stalingrad, across the vast plains of Eastern Europe, driven by a thirst for vengeance and the singular goal of planting their flag on the Reichstag. From the west, the Allied forces, American, British, and French, were relentlessly pushing forward, squeezing the remnants of the Nazi war machine into this final, desperate pocket. Hitler's thousand-year empire was not just collapsing, it was being systematically dismantled, block by block, street by bloody street. The world held its breath, watching the final violent convulsion of a global conflict that had consumed millions of lives. This was not just a battle for a city. It was the final judgment on an ideology that had plunged the world into darkness. Deep beneath the shattered streets, in the cold, concrete labyrinth of the Führerbunker, a different reality was being constructed. Here, Adolf Hitler, the architect of this global catastrophe, presided over a phantom empire. Surrounded by maps of a Germany that no longer existed, he moved non-existent armies and ordered impossible counterattacks. He raged at generals who had no soldiers left to command, his voice echoing through the damp corridors, a testament to a mind completely detached from the apocalyptic reality unfolding just a few meters above his head. He spoke of wonder weapons and last-minute miracles, clinging to the desperate hope that his will alone could turn the tide. His most loyal followers, trapped with him in this subterranean tomb, either fed his delusions or watched in silent horror as their leader descended into madness. Meanwhile, on the surface, the grim reality of the battle ground on. The Red Army, a juggernaut of steel and fire, smashed through the city's last lines of defense. These weren't the elite Wehrmacht soldiers of 1941. They were a desperate collection of old men from the Volkssturm, teenage boys from the Hitler Youth, and a few fanatical SS units, all hopelessly outmatched. Soviet T-34 tanks, symbols of industrial might and resilience, rumbled through avenues choked with smoke and the debris of fallen buildings. Their cannons tore through makeshift barricades as if they were made of paper. The fighting was savage and intimate. Every street corner, every apartment block, every sewer tunnel became a battlefield. Snipers lurked in shattered windows, and the deadly chatter of machine guns echoed relentlessly. Berlin was no longer a city. It was a meat grinder, consuming the last of its defenders and staining its streets with the blood of the final, futile stand. The Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods that Hitler had so often invoked, had finally arrived, not as a glorious myth, but as a brutal, grinding, and utterly merciless reality. On April 26th, the focus of the Soviet assault narrowed to a single iconic target, the Reichstag. This grand, fire-scarred building was more than just a structure. It was the ultimate symbol of German power, and its capture was the supreme objective for the soldiers of the Red Army. They stormed its grand steps under a hail of machine gun and anti-tank fire. What followed was a vertical battle, a fight not for territory, but for every single floor, every hallway, every room. Inside, The opulence of the old German parliament had been replaced by the chaos of close-quarters combat. Soviet and German soldiers fought hand-to-hand amidst the ruins of marble statues and beneath the gaze of tattered, burning portraits of Hitler. The air was thick with gunpowder, dust, and the shouts of men fighting for their lives. It was a desperate, primal struggle, where bayonets, knives, and even fists became the weapons of last resort. 4 days later, on April 30th, the sounds of battle had reached the Führer bunker itself. The relentless shelling shook the very foundations of the subterranean fortress. Soviet troops were now just a few hundred meters away, fighting for control of the government district above. For Hitler, the fantasy was over. There would be no miracle army, no glorious final stand. There was only the inevitable, humiliating end. Facing capture and a show trial before the world, he chose his own exit. In his private study, as the empire he built crumbled to dust around him, Adolf Hitler took his own life. His suicide was not a grand Wagnerian finale, but a quiet, pathetic act in a concrete bunker, the final cowardly admission of total and absolute defeat. The driving force of Nazism was gone, leaving behind only chaos and a legacy of unimaginable destruction. The fighting, however, did not stop with Hitler's death. For 2 more agonizing days, the battle for Berlin raged on. The city's remaining defenders, many unaware of their leader's demise or simply too fanatical to surrender, continued to fight. But their resistance was futile. On May 2, 1945, General Helmuth Weidling, the final commander of the Berlin defense area, formally surrendered the city's garrison to the Soviet forces. A strange silence began to descend upon the ruins, broken only by sporadic gunfire and the triumphant shouts of the victors. Later that day, a moment was staged that would be immortalized in history. Amidst the smoke and devastation, 2 Soviet soldiers, Meliton Kantaria and Mikhail Yegorov, climbed to the roof of the conquered Reichstag. They unfurled a large red flag, the hammer and sickle, and raised it high above the smoldering ruins of the German capital. A photographer captured the image, and it instantly became a powerful, world-spanning symbol. It was a declaration of victory, a testament to the immense sacrifice of the Soviet people, and the definitive visual endpoint of the war in Europe. From Stalingrad to Berlin, the long and bloody road had finally reached its destination. The Nazi flag, which had once flown over nearly all of Europe, was now replaced by the banner of its conquerors. The war in Europe was finally, truly over. But victory is never without cost. As the guns fell silent and the smoke began to clear, the true price of the Battle of Berlin was revealed. The city was a wasteland. Entire districts had been leveled, leaving behind a haunting landscape of rubble and ruin. The human cost was staggering. Over 80,000 Soviet soldiers lost their lives in this final, climactic battle. For the German side, the losses were even more catastrophic, with an estimated 100,000 civilians perishing from the shelling, the fighting, and the desperate conditions in the final weeks. The city's infrastructure was gone. There was no water, no electricity, no food. Only survival. The fall of Berlin marked more than just the end of a war. It marked the end of an era. The world stood amidst the ruins of a broken, fanatical empire, forced to confront the depths of human cruelty and the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition. From these ashes, a new world order would have to be built. The lines of the Cold War were already being drawn across the map of a divided Europe, with Berlin itself becoming a flashpoint for the new ideological struggle between East and West. The dawn of this new world began not with a celebration, but with a somber, silent reckoning in the ruins of what came before, a profound and enduring lesson on the price of war and the fragility of peace. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into one of history's most pivotal moments. If you found this story compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the past. Your support makes all of this possible. We'll see you in the next one.